So Alzheimer's Research UK is Europe's leading biomedical research charity looking for preventions, treatments and a cure for dementia. We're based in Cambridge, but we fund research right across the country, including lots of research here in Oxford. Thought I'd just briefly go over why we're here. I know many of you will have personal experience of dementia, but just to give you a sense of its national and international impact. So there are 850,000 people in the UK living with dementia. And it has a £26 billion impact on the economy every year, which is an enormous figure, more than the cost of heart disease and cancer combined, I think. Last year, dementia emerged as the leading cause of death in the UK. It had been very close to heart disease for many years, and last year, deaths attributed to dementia surpassed those of heart disease. And it's the only one of the top 10 leading causes of death for which there isn't a treatment to prevent it, to cure it, or to slow its progression. 1 in 3 people born this year will develop dementia if we don't find new ways to tackle the condition. And 6 times more is spent on cancer research than dementia research. Now, we don't begrudge cancer research any of that money. It's extremely important that cancer research continues to get funding, but it just gives you an idea of how far behind dementia research is due to lack of funding. Okay, so what is dementia? So dementia is a word we use to describe a set of symptoms. We tend to think of memory loss, but it can affect things like reasoning skills, communication skills. It can cause people's personality to change. And it gets worse over time, and it affects the way that people live their lives. And this is distinct from what we see in normal healthy aging. So as people get older, they might need to write things down a little bit more, might find a few everyday tasks take a little bit longer. But dementia is distinct from those sort of changes. So you can see from this graph, we've got memory and thinking skills down one side, and then years along the bottom. In aging, you might see a gradual decline that doesn't really go too far down. But with dementia, it's much steeper, and the effects are much more pronounced. So it's not a normal part of aging, but when we ask people what causes dementia, that's the thing that we tend to hear. And when we did ask people back in 2015, only 23% of people replied that it was a result of brain diseases or brain degeneration. We're running this survey again now, actually, so we're hoping to see that more people recognise the true nature of dementia now than they did in 2015. But it's quite a persistent misconception that somehow dementia is a part of the ageing process. So a lot of what I do in the communications team at Alzheimer's Research UK is try and challenge that kind of misconception. So dementia is caused by diseases. And these are the diseases that cause it. So Alzheimer's disease is responsible for about 2/3 of dementia cases. But then there are other forms as well, vascular dementia, which is to do with problems with blood supply to the brain. Mixed dementia, so vascular dementia and Alzheimer's disease sometimes go hand in hand. Mixed dementia. Dementia with Lewy bodies, which has some similarities to Parkinson's disease, but whereas Parkinson's mostly causes movement problems, dementia with Lewy bodies causes memory problems and thinking problems. Frontotemporal dementia, a form of dementia that affects the front of the brain and particularly causes communication difficulties, behaviour and personality changes. Parkinson's dementia, so people who get Parkinson's disease can go on to develop dementia, and there are other rarer forms as well. The symptoms of dementia vary between diseases. But what really determines someone's symptoms is which area of the brain is affected by a disease. So different parts of the brain have different functions. So at the back of the brain, for example, that's where we process visual information. If people get a form of dementia that affects the back of the brain, they'll have visual symptoms initially. I don't know whether any of you remember the author Terry Pratchett. He had a form of dementia called posterior cortical atrophy that affects the back of the brain. So his initial symptoms were visual rather than more typical memory-led forms of dementia. And this slide just encapsulates what we do in Alzheimer's Research UK. So we crystallised our vision and our mission last year. So what we want to achieve is a world where people are free from the fear, harm and heartbreak of dementia. We want to do that by funding, delivering pioneering research, collaborating to speed up global scientific progress, and confronting misconceptions about dementia across society. We've got an ambitious mission to bring about the first life-changing dementia treatment by 2025. We have 4 goals, which are to better understand dementia, find new ways to reduce risk, improve diagnosis, and of course develop new treatments. Okay, so a large part of what we do is working to better understand the diseases that cause dementia. So what all these diseases have in common is that they cause nerve cells in the brain to become damaged and to die. In Alzheimer's disease, 2 of the chief culprits are these proteins. Amyloid plaques that build up outside nerve cells in the brain, and tau tangles which build up within those nerve cells. And as well as some other processes that are involved in damaged nerve cells, they eventually cause parts of the brain to physically shrink. So you can see there a depiction of a healthy brain on the left and a shrunken part there representing someone with advanced Alzheimer's disease. Okay, these changes in the brain, the build-up of these proteins and initial damage to nerve cells get underway long before symptoms start to show. And we want to understand more about these processes, unravel the molecular details of what drives damage to the brain. And that research is really the foundation of all of our other goals, to prevent, diagnose, and to treat. We first need to understand these diseases more thoroughly. Okay, so diagnosis is also an important part of what we do. So currently, a diagnosis might be made by a doctor through observations, clinical observations, discussions with relatives. They'll take a medical history. They might do a blood test, but this is really to rule out other potential causes of memory and thinking problems, so vitamin deficiencies and those kind of things can give people dementia-like symptoms. They'll use brain scans sometimes to support a diagnosis, but there isn't a conclusive biological test that you can give people to determine what's causing their dementia. Mostly we rely on memory and thinking tests. So doctors will assess different aspects of a person's memory and thinking ability and then match those symptoms to those that are typical for a particular form of dementia. So the tests are, they're more comprehensive than this. So this gives you an idea of the kinds of questions that might be asked. So we're funding research to try and find better ways to diagnose people with different forms of dementia. We want to diagnose people earlier and more accurately. So currently the only way to be 100% sure of a disease that a person's had and that's caused dementia is by examining their brain tissue after they've died. There's a strong overlap between the symptoms of different diseases, so misdiagnosis happens unfortunately too often. And a crucial reason for wanting to improve diagnosis is because some of the treatments that researchers are working on we think will work much better at the very early stages, so before symptoms start to show. Okay, and we also, of course, want to develop new treatments. Now, there are treatments for dementia at the moment, specifically for Alzheimer's disease, but they might be prescribed for other forms of dementia. These form medications, the first three are given to people in the mild to moderate stage of Alzheimer's disease, and the fourth one might be given to people who are a little bit further along. And what these drugs do is help nerve cells to communicate with one another. They boost the levels of certain brain chemicals that allow the nerve cells to send messages more effectively. But what they don't do is halt those underlying disease processes. They don't protect the nerve cells from damage. So they can help people with their symptoms maybe for a year or so. They don't work for everybody, but they do provide many people with important help. But what we want to do now is try and improve on these and develop treatments that will actually protect nerve cells in the brain. So we're investing a lot into different initiatives to try and bring about treatments more quickly. We're partnering with pharmaceutical companies who have the really deep pockets and who can fund expensive clinical trials. And we're working with them on an initiative called the Dementia Consortium to develop new biological targets for drugs that hopefully the pharmaceutical companies will then take on and push through clinical trials. And we have our Drug Discovery Alliance. That's a network of 3 dedicated dementia drug discovery labs. There's one in UCL, there's one in Cambridge, and there's one here in Oxford, and you're going to hear from one of the researchers working there a little later on. And finally, we want to reduce the risk of dementia. Try and develop ways to limit the chances that someone will develop one of these diseases in the first place. So there are some things that you can do, some lifestyle changes that are associated with a lower risk of developing dementia. And what you'll notice is that many of these are the same things your doctor might tell you to do to maintain the heart health. So what we say is what's good for the heart tends to be also good for the head. But we want to develop concrete strategies, evidence-based methods to encourage people to adopt those sort of lifestyle changes and to bring their risk of dementia down. Okay, so we fund research right across the country. Mark talked to you about the Oxford Network Centre, but we have 15 network centres right around the UK. Another thing we're doing is trying to increase participation in dementia research. So none of the research much of the research that our scientists do wouldn't be possible without volunteers who take part in studies. So we support this research register called Join Dementia Research. Over 30,000 people have signed up. And this allows researchers to get in touch with you and invite you to take part in a study, and you match the criteria of their studies, so they'll invite you to take part. There's no obligation to do so if you join the register. It's just they'll tell you about the details of the study, and you can take part if you want to. So I think Join Dementia Research have a stand in the hall, so if you're interested in taking part, come and see me at the break or someone from Join Dementia Research. We also provide free health information. So if you drop by our stand, we've got lots of information booklets about different forms of dementia and other aspects of the condition. We also have an information line, so if you have questions about dementia or dementia research, you can email them or give them a call. And again, those details are at the stand. You've probably seen a lot of stories about dementia in the news, so I work in the communications team. So part of what we do is to try and make sure someone says something sensible about these stories when they come out. So some of those headlines you'll see are either misleading or exaggerated in some way. So we work with journalists. We provide comments that they'll run in their articles what we already know and to critically evaluate the claims that the journalists might make. I think my favourite one is chocolate can halt dementia. It's not true, unfortunately. Okay, none of the work we do would be possible without our supporters. So we're a fundraising charity. We don't get any government funds to support research. So if anyone is interested in fundraising, there's also opportunities to do that if you drop by our stand.